Hello you guys, and welcome back to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and today we're going to talk about decluttering our fantasy selves. Now, this is not an original idea. I was very inspired yesterday by watching the Messy Minimalist tackle this issue. I'll link her channel and video below if you're interested. You know, typically I have a schedule of what videos I'm going to film, but this was just one that spoke to me, and I realized that I really wanted to talk about it and try it out for myself. So that is what this video is today. Now, when talking about our fantasy selves, this is talking about kind of that ideal version of ourselves that maybe we think we are in our head, but in reality we're not. And unfortunately, these fantasy selves often mean we have certain clutter around our homes that we have for when we are acting as our fantasy selves. This can be tough to get rid of in decluttering because it's kind of like, oh, I'm going to use that when I get into that, or I need that for this, when in reality we're not actually doing that very much. So these are very tricky things to get rid of, especially if they have to do with kind of like that ideal version of ourselves that we want to be. And sometimes it's important for us to be realistic about what we've done so far, and sometimes habits can change, but oftentimes they don't. And so today I'm going to be sharing 10 things that I'm decluttering from my fantasy self. I do feel like I've started to do a better job of this thus far. I know a previous video I will link up here, girl products that I no longer buy. You can check that out, but those are some things where I feel like I was holding on to them or buying them when in reality it was an ideal version of myself or a fantasy version of myself, not the real one. So these objects are in no particular order. I just went around my apartment and saw what I could find, things that I've been holding on to that are more so from my ideal self. So let's take a look. First, we have a yoga mat. Now, I actually haven't had this for that long, but it's been in the family for a long time. That makes it sound like it's like this ancient artifact. But basically, this was from my parents' house. We had them when we were younger. We didn't really do yoga then, but when we moved to this apartment, the rec center nearby offers free yoga class on Wednesday nights. And I thought, oh, what a perfect way, you know, meet people in the area, do some fitness. Like, that's the ideal Sarah would go to a yoga class every Wednesday night. But the real Sarah hates leaving the house after I come home from work, and especially now that we're getting into colder weather, it's darker earlier, I have really no interest. And so because of that, I think for me, having this is a fantasy version of myself, and I don't even really like yoga, to be honest. I feel like it's a little boring, but at the same time, I recognize it's a really great form of exercise and also just like meditation in a way. But regardless, for me, I have a hard time getting into yoga, so I don't think I'll be going to these classes. I'm gonna get rid of this mat, or give it back to my parents. There are two clothing items that I was holding on to that were for my fantasy self. Probably the biggest reason I've been holding on to them has been kind of a weight related thing. Several years ago, I gained a lot of weight and have, over the past 2.5 years since following a vegan diet, have gradually lost about 25 pounds. Now, it's been very gradual, and I am not necessarily aligning all my actions to help me be successful, but for the most part, it's been a really helpful switch. So I'm still losing weight, just at a very gradual pace. And so I've been holding on to some things that I used to wear that I am hoping soon I'll be able to fit into again. Now, that being said, fantasy Sarah is a lot more fashionable and would wear these type of things, when reality Sarah, even when I do lose that extra weight and get back to this size, I acknowledge that, you know what, I don't think these items are gonna be things that I wear at that point. So this first thing, this was a gift when I think I was like maybe 5 years ago. It's a dress here. I think it's so beautiful, and I do have a thing for white dresses. I love white dresses. I love dresses in general, but especially white dresses. And this was a gift from a friend, and I did wear it a couple of times. However, I was realizing that even though I can almost fit into it, it's very close. This is from, yeah, like 5 years ago. Even though I'm almost there in terms of the size, you know, now being a 26-year-old and, you know, a couple years away from having kids, I don't think this dress, it's kind of short, like I just don't think this dress is the type of dress that I should be wearing anymore. And so even though I can objectively love it, it's a little bit too revealing, a little too much skin showing, and I feel like it's just not the right thing anymore. It's kind of more so for fantasy Sarah, who is, oh, I'm gonna wear this when I'm traveling in Greece or something like that. But I just don't see that as being a reality with this. So I'm going to be getting rid of this. My other piece of clothing, yeah, see, they still have the tags on. That's bad. I've been holding on to them. I talked about financial guilt. I'll link a video up here, but this has still been something where I have felt some financial guilt about. It's a pair of dress pants. I think I've had these for several years sitting in my closet. They have been too tight. They're getting closer to fitting, but reality here is that, first of all, they're a little too long for me. So even if they fit fully, that extra length might be kind of annoying. And the way they fit, even if I can fit them on, it's just like too tight that it doesn't really look flattering. So even though I still feel some guilt that I never wore these, I'm going to finally let it go. So next up, we have some cooking equipment. I do love to cook, and there have been times where Jake said to me, you know, do you really need that? Or I feel like we never use some of this stuff. And I've been like, oh no, I'm gonna use it for this. But there were a couple things I found that are for the fantasy Sarah. The first one is this nut milk bag. I think I bought this at a natural market or something from where we used to live. I was really excited about it. But here's what I've come to terms with, even though I think it's so awesome for people who make their homemade nut milk. I personally make hemp milk and sometimes cashew milk. Now, the nut milk bag I think is specifically for, well, this one says great for making almond milk, that kind of stuff. But the reality I had to consider is that I really like hemp milk and cashew milk, and those you don't need a nut milk bag because, at least with the high-powered blender that I have, you don't have to strain it. It's ready to go after blending. And I just think that, it's not that I'm lazy, but I just don't want to waste the time to add this extra step in here. We also typically don't even have raw almonds around the house. I'm much more likely to have cashews because I'll use those in a bunch of things. And the hemp seeds are so effortless to keep around the house. Even though Fantasy Sarah is all excited about making homemade almond milk and does it often, I just don't see that as being the type of thing I'm doing. So I don't need this in that case. But if you make your own almond milk, props to you. I really like the hemp milk or cashew milk where I don't have to do any straining. It's done when I finish blending. The next thing I have here, this is a kit of those frosting tips. So I, back in the day, attended a cake decorating class and had so much fun. And also I have a big sweet tooth. So I always thought, how cool would it be to just be this awesome cake decorator? Well, fast forward now, and I'm trying overall to kind of watch the desserts and have much healthier desserts. And so I'm not really making traditional frostings with things, especially not enough frosting where I would need to have cake decorations. Plus, to have these tips, you need a plastic bag of some sort, whether it is just a Ziploc bag you're using or like a cake decorating bag. And I feel like, especially since I've been trying to reduce my waste in plastic, that doesn't really seem like a great option. So long story short, I realized that I'm probably never going to use these anymore. That's my ideal self decorates cakes in my free time, but I'm going to be getting rid of these. The next cooking gadget, this was something like a little kit I bought when I was in Japan. I thought it was so cool. I haven't used it. These, it's tough to tell, they're all, I don't think that's gonna come through. These are all little letters, and the kit here, you basically put the letters in the purple band and then you stamp it on different cookies. So you roll out the cookies in this shape, you use the band to stamp letters on it, and you can basically spell words on your cookies, which in theory is a really cute idea. Ideal Sarah would spell cute little messages on the cookies, but reality Sarah, if I'm making cookies, I don't really care what they look like. I just want them to be delicious, and I'm gonna make them in an effortless way. And I don't have time to roll things out and put the little letters there. So for me, this isn't something worth keeping, even though for many times Jake has been like, hey, do you want to get rid of that? And I would say, oh no, I'm going to use that. Here we are. Now this is 4 years later after I bought them. Still haven't used it. So getting rid of these. My last kitchen item, these are like cream horn little molds. I actually bought these not super long ago, maybe about a year or a year and a half ago. And the story is that my mother-in-law, she talked about how she was obsessed with these cream horns she had at this one place and could never find them. And I thought, oh, I'm gonna make some yummy cream horns. They did taste really good, I thought. But I think for me at this point, I don't visualize myself making them more. I also don't visualize myself buying like the puff pastry, and they're just not super nutritious, and I'm trying to again, simplify the way I'm eating and the types of ingredients I'm using. So because of that, I am going to be getting rid of these. And then for my final 3 items, there are a couple books that I thought I was going to read. The ideal Sarah was going to take some time to read these, but the truth is I don't think I'm going to anymore. And I've kind of understood that I could just keep holding on to these things for years and not actually ever reading them. This first one, Jake originally got this book. It's called The Conquest of Happiness, and thought it was a really cool book. We hadn't ever heard of it before, but we got it. And Jake started reading it, but then realized that he wasn't really into it and stopped and was about to donate it. But then I was like, well, I kind of want to read that, like hear about the science of happiness. But then knowing myself, I really don't end up spending that much time reading for my own curiosity. I read other materials for school or for other things like that, but not really, things like this. And so we've held on to it for maybe 4 or 5 years at this point, and we're finally gonna let it go. Someone else can hopefully get value out of it with reading it. I bought this book about a little over a year ago, and it's a history book looking at Western impact and Middle Eastern response. I thought, I'd read this book and be able to understand a lot better what was happening in the Middle East, which is still something I'm very interested about, but I think at this point, just looking at the direction my life is heading and what my priorities are, I'm not going to be spending as much time reading history books for my specific job with being a middle school social studies teacher. There's just not as much time to get into all of the nitty-gritty details. I've got a very strict curriculum. And so before, my ideal self would be like, oh, I can understand what's going on in the Middle East and bring lessons in for my students and all of that. I just don't think it's in the cards for me right now. So basically I am gonna pass this book on. Again, I wish I read it. I wish that I had taken the time to understand and learn about those. But again, where life is going, there's just not time right now. So I'm gonna let this go. And then finally, we've got this economics book. And we were holding on to some of these when we were thinking that, who knows what our new jobs will be teaching. Possibly we'd be teaching econ, which we weren't thrilled about. Fortunately, that didn't happen. But we were holding on to this book. And then I was thinking, well, I never really took much of an econ class, so maybe I should look over it. And I was even thinking that, well, Jake and I we have a teaching YouTube channel and a teacher store where we sell some of our teaching creations. And I even thought, well, maybe I can read this book, better understand economics, and then start creating economics resources. But that's silly, because if I haven't used something in my class, I shouldn't be trying to sell it, make something to sell. So basically I'm letting this go, and it's probably good, because was I really gonna read this giant econ book just for fun? I don't think so. So that wraps it up. Those are 10 items that I have gotten rid of because they were things that my fantasy self would have been wanting to use. Now I understand that there could be some things in your life, and I think I have a few still, where technically you haven't used them yet, but you do feel really strongly that it is going to be applicable and you are going to need to use it, that you are going to make that change. And so if there is something you're thinking about with that, maybe use that item as something to motivate you to start making that change. Maybe you give yourself a deadline. If you haven't started using it by this date, then you have to let it go. Something like that could help hold you accountable to reach those changes that you want. If you enjoy minimalist related content or healthy living content, I do post several videos per week. We'd love to have you as a subscriber if you're not yet part of our community, and there's plenty more videos on this channel you can check out here. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.